Hello, I'm Kenny.
I'm Alex. In this video, we'll discuss how bond markets work and what impacts them.
To understand how the bond market works, we need to understand a few important principles of macroeconomy. Now, macroeconomy consists of broad factors that impact an economy, like government policies and the level of interest rates.
These are examples of fiscal and monetary policy, which are important macroeconomic tools used to manage the activity in an economy. Both impact all markets, but have particular importance to bond markets, and we'll explain why. Fiscal policy broadly refers to the tax policies and spending decisions the federal government makes to influence the direction of an economy. Monetary policy refers to the decisions and activities that a country's central bank takes to regulate economic activity.
Let's start at the very beginning. So oftentimes government need extra money, much more than they can collect in form of taxes. So they borrow money by issuing bonds. And this is what we refer to as government bonds.
In return for giving the government a loan, investors are promised interest payments that they will receive periodically until the loan matures, also called a coupon. Each bond has a maturity date and an interest rate that is agreed to in advance.
Interesting, but why name it a coupon?
Great question. It's called a coupon because back when bonds were issued on an actual piece of paper, they used to come with a coupon attached to the bottom that an investor would need to tear off in order to receive their interest payments. But how do governments determine what a fair coupon is or interest rate?
That is a great question, and this is where the central banks come in. Now, a country's central bank influences the level of interest rate at any given time. Sometimes they raise the interest rate and sometimes they cut the interest rate. In doing so, they influence the cost of borrowing for government, corporations, and citizens. In Canada, our central bank is called the Bank of Canada, or the BOC. And in the United States, it is called the US Federal Reserve, or the Fed.
For example, you might be starting to drive and are thinking about purchasing your own car someday. Unless you've saved enough money to pay for the entire car in full, which is hard to do, you'll have to take out a loan from the bank. If you take out a loan when interest rates are low, your monthly payments to the bank for the loan will be lower than when interest rates are high. With lower interest rates and lower monthly payments, you may be inclined to spend more by purchasing your car sooner or buying a more expensive car.
This mode of reasoning is true for governments as well as corporations. When interest rates are lower, they tend to borrow more and spend more. But when interest rates are high, the cost of borrowing is high, so spending tends to be lower.
As we mentioned earlier, central banks care about how much people spend because it's their job to maintain a level of price stability within the economy. Let me explain what I mean. If spending gets out of control, more people are willing to spend more for a finite number of goods or services, causing prices to increase. This cycle can repeat, leading to prices of everything being driven higher, and your current income and savings being reduced in value even more quickly. This is referred to as inflation, the overall upward price movements of goods and services in an economy.
So while a bit of inflation is okay, 2% a year is a general target for most developed economies. Too much inflation can be harmful, and this is when the central banks step in to bring the inflation down. And how can they do this? By making it more expensive for people to borrow money. From our earlier example, if interest rate went up, you might wait a little longer to buy the car you always wanted, or be forced to buy a cheaper car. This is why controlling the level of interest rates is one of the primary tools central bank uses to control inflation.
Now let's bring some of these macroeconomic factors back to bonds. All of this matters to bond markets because bond prices are impacted by interest rates. Higher interest rates hurt bond prices and vice versa. Lower interest rates mean higher bond prices.
That's right, and this happens because when interest rates rise, The old bonds that were issued at a lower rate becomes less attractive. Therefore, the bond price must go down to reflect the unattractiveness of the bonds to investors.
We've talked about government bonds. Now let's discuss how corporate bonds issued by companies slightly differ.
Just like government, companies also need money to finance their projects and make big purchases, much more than they can collect through their revenue streams alone. And this is where corporate bonds come in.
Corporate bonds work the same way as government bonds, but with a caveat. Companies generally carry more risk than governments do. Due to this risk, corporate bonds usually have higher coupon rates to compensate investors for the increased risk they are taking on. And they'll often use the interest rate on government bonds as a guide for what their coupon rate should be.
The level of interest rate also influences how much a company can borrow and how much bonds will be for sale in the market. Remember, companies have budgets just like we do.
As we discussed, that while the state of the economy will naturally impact any market, macroeconomic factors, particularly interest rates, are closely tied to bond markets.
Hopefully, this video has given you a greater understanding about how bond market works.
Thanks for watching, and be sure to tune into our other videos to continue to learn more about investing.
Have a great day.